whether it was a toy you had hoped for or something else. So we want to welcome everybody to Who Gets Grandma's Yellow Pie Plate with the University of Minnesota Extension. We are glad to see you here today. We are going to be just, we want to create some conversation about this non-titled possession. So we're currently chatting about what is an item you remember wanting from your childhood. And then if you also have a concern, what is your greatest concern or a concern that you have when it comes thinking about transferring non-titled property? It kind of gives us an idea to start thinking about why are we here? Why did we decide to participate today? What are we hoping to get out of this moment as well for the next hour? So few families do escape this topic, decisions about a lifetime of accumulated possessions in later life. And so we're going to be talking about, some key decision factors that can help with successful property decisions. We also kind of always enjoy knowing why people are here. And so we are launching a poll that just asks, why are you participating in today's webinar? Are you here strictly for personal use? Are you here for professional use? Or a little bit of both? We'll give you
We
a
will
few
be bringing
moments.
that poll up shortly here.
Yep, it is up, Sarah.
It is. Oh,
Yep.
okay. It's on my third screen. I need to look over there. Thanks. I'm like, where is it?
So we'll just give you a few more seconds if you hadn't had a
Orientation
chance to
accounting.
do that. Okay. So I'm going to close that poll and in just a second. Pretty good participation rate. Excellent. And in case you're also wondering, most of you are here for personal use, which isn't surprising considering the topic. A few people here only for professional, and then everybody else here for both of those. So thanks for sharing with that. And it is one of those things that's helpful. Sarah and I both do this professionally, but I've also used this in my personal life as well when talking with other family members about this kind of stuff to help ease that transition. So in case you're wondering who this is talking to you, my name is Samantha Roth. I am an extension educator in Scott and Carver counties with the University of Minnesota Extension. Joining me today is Sara Croymans, also an extension educator based out of the regional office in Morris. And both of us focus on financial capability as one of our primary focuses in our role. So what are we doing today? What are you hoping to get out of this? We are hoping in the next hour or so that we can do talk about the challenges and complexities involved in personal possessions, look at the 6 key protective factors for successful planning and protecting family relationships, as well as share some educational resources that you can share with others and use for yourself as well. So let's get started. Typically, when we think about inheritance decisions, there's 2 major types of property that come into play, and that's your titled and non-titled property. We often understand what happens when somebody passes away to transfer the titled property. And when we're talking about titled property, that's your land, your home, a certificate of deposit, anything that shows an evidence of ownership is in a written document would be a titled property. But oftentimes we ignore those non-titled possessions. Some people might call it the stuff or the knickknacks that are hanging out. And that value of those possessions can be in the eye of the beholder, and they often have an emotional and financial value. So when we think of different non-titled property values, one could be emotional only. So those could be, blocks you played with as a child or a book that you were read to as a child. There can be some things that are financial only. So that could be a gun collection that nobody has an interest in, or a pewter collection or a rock collection. Those kind of things might have, I guess rocks may not have a financial thing, but you never know. There could be things that have both an emotional and a financial connection to people. So that could be your grandfather's gold watch that has been passed down from generation to generation. And then you can have things that are neither emotional or financial. And I'm going to say Aunt Sam's paintings, that would be behind me right here. I don't think anybody really has an emotional or financial, but they make me happy. So that's all that matters. And when we think about both of these, the types of property, both of them are very important to people. Often, though, Evidence does suggest that most adults have not planned ahead in regard to either their financial assets or personal property, and that majority of individuals do die without a legal will. Even fewer have thought about what they're going to do with that personal property, and there's clearly major gaps between knowing that planning ahead is important and the actual taking the action to plan ahead for people. Oftentimes, that lack of planning and communication results in conflicts, inaccurate assumptions, wishing you had had critical conversations, and not knowing if you're carrying out a property owner's wishes. And you can also lose those valued possessions as well when it is not planned. So again, it's just really important to think about both of them, and what is going to happen. Um, so personal possessions are more common source of conflict than money and inheritance. You'll find yourself, fighting over things that if you were to look back on it, you would think were silly. A plate, a toaster, a piece of jewelry, so it could just be, it just can cause a lot of issues. And there have been headlines over the past 10, 20 years, and these keep changing, talking about the issues that have come up with families and a variety of sources trying to address them and help people understand that it is important. So one of the things that it is you often hear when it comes to these thinking about possessions is to just divide my personal belongings evenly among my heirs. And it's often not uncommon that you'll actually see that written in many estate planning books to recommend just putting in that line into your will saying divide it equally. So think about your own family. Would saying that actually work for them? We often think that oftentimes non-title transfers are assumed to be very matter of fact, easy and simple. And that's typically far from the reality for most families. It's often that source of conflict because of the way we all view those items. And again, it's not that money or the title possession that is causing those conflicts. It is that non-title things. There are some complexities as we think about, why is this such a challenge? Often that emotional meaning of personal possessions combined with the nature of family relationships can offer challenges during this time. When we think of, passing on a personal possession, it involves a process of holding on as well as letting go of memories of our family history of important relationships, and then the physical object as well. It's also thinking about those memories and grieving the loss of the owner as it is about the objects when we're trying to decide what to do with something or who gets it. In many cases, objects are tied to remembering and respecting family members, our family history, our rituals, our traditions, and our relationships. So a baptism gown, a pie plate that was always at family gatherings. But it's not really about that, physicalness of the pie plate or the baptism gown. It's about who's going to carry on that memory and have access to it. Um, so there is a quote here from a daughter who, after her mother passed away, she said, "My mom's funeral was a piece of cake compared to cleaning out the family home and closing the door for the last time." We also, think about all the messages that can be sent about who gets what, when, and how can destroy or enhance our family relationships. So we think about symbols of trust, love, power, control, being a favorite, getting it as reward, or maybe getting it as a punishment. It can also show us insights into how our family relationships currently are. So who does count in it, what boundaries, the quality of relationships. Oftentimes, there are powerful messages that are both intended and unintended, and those messages can have consequences, especially for that family relationship, whether it's between the parent and the child, between siblings, between step and biological children, extended family members, etc. It's also important to think about, like for some family members, that decision about their parents' possessions is the last straw in a long history of conflict and struggles between siblings and in laws. And in other ways, it can also bring families together and enhance distant relationships. Um, so when you think about, if there is little communication and planning, surviving family members are often left to make assumptions about intended and unintended messages. And, think to yourself, what are some of those messages, if you've gone through this, that have been you've seen or as you've discussed with people, or if you're about to go through this or you know it's coming, is there something that, the way you see it and the way your siblings see it may be very different as well? So that's a little background on why this topic is important. So now we're going to get into the 6 key protective decision-making factors when it comes to passing on your personal possessions. And the first one is to just recognize that this is a sensitive issue. So if you wouldn't mind in the chat, please put what you think makes this inheritance such a sensitive issue for families. All right, so we have emotions, that emotional value, perceptions of favoritism, all those memories, emotional ties to the value. There might be some money in it, that legacy, um, disrespect for each other. So yeah, greed, yeah, unknown future, fairness. I want the most, greed. Those kind of played right into each other. The trust, being a favored person. You maybe just be assuming you're getting something. Yep, decision making during the trauma. Excellent. You guys have, I think, hit everything we're going to talk about. So that's good. So thanks for sharing that as well. Um, so yeah, when we are thinking about this, it's sensitive because we avoid facing one of the things that may not have been said is that we avoid facing our own and others' mortality. We do not live in a place that wants to talk about death and dying, but the reality is that we all do die someday, and we need to be prepared for that. It's also thinking about planning for what happens to possessions when a family member does need to downsize because of deteriorating health or when a loved one dies. It means we have to acknowledge the painful realities of loss, of independence, and death. So this doesn't just occur when somebody passes away. It occurs when, the family home is sold because mom and dad are moving into an apartment or into assisted living. And so there can be levels of grief and loss in that as well. There's again that conflict or being, bringing up the issues of who should get what can be especially sensitive when there are estranged family members, siblings who never got along, or a parent and adult child who find little in common. The potential for conflict can be high again if there's history of challenging family relationships. And even if there's not a history of challenging family relationships, there is still a potential for conflict. Oftentimes, too, this is a time where decisions about possessions can involve revealing family secrets. For example, learning dad is giving his book collection to a daughter given up for adoption that no one had ever known about before is one example that has been given before. And you all mentioned that this greedy. So we don't want to be seen as that we could be greedy. That sounds horrible. Or that, that we just want control of it as well. So we're thinking about how will our motives be interpreted. And then that's very real for both the receivers of those possessions as well as the person, the giver, who is typically the older parent as a property owner as they give those things out. Oftentimes we'll blame the other generation for not being willing to engage in conversations. So parents versus blaming the children, children blaming the parents when we just don't know how to start talking about it. So think about, if this has happened to you before, how have you responded to another person when they try to initiate discussions about the disposition of possessions after death? And what were your intentions if you were trying to initiate such discussions about what would happen, your possessions after death? Um, so here are just a few example is that, the givers may say, the givers may hear is, I don't have room for anything, mother. We already have a full house. It's just not something I would use. And those possessions to them have been very, they've lived their life with them. They've been part of their daily livings. Um, Evidence shows that receivers' intentions are to learn of parents' wishes to be able to help them carry them out, whatever those wishes are. Fear and concerns about cleaning out the family home are very real. However, for some, it may be about getting exactly what they want or denying others what they want. So owners, their fears are rejecting that family history, the traditions, meaningful collections to them that maybe nobody else really does want. Um, and, take time to think about your own motives and be upfront with others when talking, and be aware of making those assumptions or jumping to conclusions about someone else's motives, whether they are the givers or the receivers. There's also, when beginning that conversation about inheritance, consider who needs to talk about it, who needs to be included over time. It's not uncommon for spouses or partners, despite many years of marriage, to have very different expectations and opinions about personal possessions. Many parents want to involve their adult children in these conversations when planning ahead, while others may choose to inform the adult kids of their decisions after the fact.
So Sam, I'm going to go back one slide here. Lisa had shared in the chat earlier, if I can go back one, there we go, that she was concerned about her spouse wanting to take everything from his parents and that they
Mm.
didn't have room. So thank you for sharing that, Lisa. I just really liked that comment, and there's so many conversations that need to happen on so many levels. So now we're going to take a look at that second key protective decision-making factor, and that's determining what you want to accomplish. And that really makes us look at the goals here. I do want to share that this program, this project was developed by Marlene Stum, a professor in family social science. She just retired this spring, but she worked with a team of educators several years ago, and they did a lot of surveys and interviews, and you'll see and hear several quotes from participants that came from that research. And so as they did that research, they identified these 6 key protective factors. So now looking at the second one with determining what you want to accomplish with the goals, and you've probably heard, if you don't know where you're going, it's hard to know when you're there. And the same applies to these inheritance decisions, and identifying what you want to accomplish when distributing and transferring those personal possessions is really important. Too often, people aren't talking, they're not sharing, and so those goals remain unidentified or unspoken. And so as a result, family members are really unclear about what they're trying to accomplish, or they're not on the same page. Definitely. So on the screen here, we have 5 potential goals, and I saw several of these come through in the chat earlier. So the first might be to maintain privacy. The owners of the property might have goals of keeping decision-making private within the family, and so they might want to avoid public auctions or court cases. Some older folks might be adamant about not having their possessions laid out for the whole neighborhood to see, but then other people could really care less, but perhaps maintaining privacy might be a goal. The second one is protecting or improving family relationships. And I saw that come up multiple times in the chat. And so the goal here might include avoiding major family feuds, tugs of war, and years of not talking. This goal is high on many family members' list of goals. Definitely wanting to maintain that peace, respect, and trust. The third potential goal might be to be fair to everyone involved. And being fair is a common statement heard from many family members as they go through this process. But unfortunately, this goal does not have a common meaning. And one of the 6 factors we are going to be looking at looks specifically and a little bit deeper about what being fair might mean. A fourth potential goal is preserving memories. At the beginning, when folks jumped on the webinar, Sam had asked folks to share about personal items or items they remembered from their childhood that they perhaps wanted, and several people shared why, right? The mom had hung clothes on the clothesline, so those clothespins were really, really precious. And so there are a lot of memories that go with those objects, and they probably include family rituals and traditions or celebrations, which means they're also clearly tied, of course, to the memories and the respect for the owner. The last one here is contributing to society. And so some givers, owners might focus on leaving a legacy to contribute to their favorite charity, museum, or certain causes. This could mean financially valuable collections might be sold or donated to an organization versus going to family members. And so it's really important for folks to sit back and think about what those goals might be. Um, I'm holding up, and you can't see it because of my blurred background, but there is a workbook that is available, and we'll be sharing a link later in the webinar. But in the workbook, there are worksheets that go with all of the concepts that we've been talking about. And there is a worksheet in there to help families determine what their goals might be. So now we're going to the third protective factor, Sam.
Yep, and that one is to, what does being fair means? So for a lot of people, this is different. So when we think about just common transfer rules, is to focus on everybody treating everybody the same. That would be equality. So a challenge when it comes to personal possessions is the impossibility of dividing everything equally. When we think of, a book, can we divide a book that were read to as a child, evenly? That'd be a little bit challenging. Family members do need to be creative when trying to achieve some sense of being equal as well. It is quite common for people to focus on creating an equal chance of receiving possessions by drawing straws, using monopoly money to stand in for real money. That way it'll help even out the differences in socioeconomic status of adult children. Oftentimes you'll just have people say, I just want this to be fair. And that is often described as an important motive or goal when making decisions about both financial assets and personal possessions. But what does fair really mean? So a critical step in making decisions about transferring property and possessions is to sort out what fair means in the context of your family. And every family is going to be different, even, if you're spouses, if you're a husband and wife and one of your mothers pass away and then the other mother passes away, both of those families will look at fair being different. So most family members do have unwritten and often unspoken rules about who should get what and how the decisions should be made. So the oldest always gets to choose first, the mom's favorite, the only girl, I'm the only girl, so I should get to choose first because I'm the girl, about how those decisions should be made, but that may not be fair how others perceive it. So when we think about the non-titled property, fairness issues emerge in both the outcome of who gets what, as well as the process, what method was used to distribute those items. If family members feel that the process has been fair, they are typically more willing to accept the outcome then. So it's not always about that final end product, it's how did that end product get to be in that person's hand, and was that considered to be fair? So we have a scenario for you to think about. Oh, sorry. I thought I did my slide. Here we go. The Winnie the Pooh book. So think about what fair can mean, and we want to get your opinions. So here's a family situation. The oldest daughter has talked about how her parents have recently died within 3 months of each other. They had a will but had not made decisions about their personal possessions. My sister, brother, and I have been going through the house and making decisions about who gets what. It's gone pretty smoothly. There's only one item in the whole house that all three of us want. It is the Winnie the Pooh book that mom and dad read to each of us when we were young. It has always been kept in the living room on the current corner bookshelf. So we have the three siblings. The oldest daughter, who told the story, is 48, is divorced and remarried with two stepkids that she is raising. There's another daughter who's 46 and single, and then there's a son who is 44 who is married with one child. So think about these and decide who should get the book, what would be fair, and what rules might be used. And once you know that, I
So
see
we
some
have a
of you already said
poll.
that.
We do have
Oh,
a
we do
poll
have.
for
Oh,
this one.
awesome.
Yes, yes, great.
So Sarah's gonna put up the poll for um, who gets the Winnie the Pooh book, and then you can decide who should get it. And we gave you even more options. So we have the three children, the step grandchildren, biological grandchild, or nobody, or an other.
I'm sorry,
And
Sam, did you say that all the children want the book?
yes, all the children
Okay.
want the book.
Okay.
So who do you think, I guess, deserves the book? And I do see some of you, putting in how you would determine that. So we have, put names in a hat, luck of the draw, um, a rock, paper, scissors, rotate among families, names and hats, cut the book in thirds,
Yeah.
give each one third. David, I feel like you're an instigator there. Another person said other or selected other that they can each get it for 4 months of the year. Um, share that is each get for a while and then rotate. Order 2 more copies on eBay. Yep. All right. So we're gonna just stop the poll so that you can see. And so the results are for this group is that 24% said the biological grandchild. A whole bunch of people said other. That's over almost half of you. And then kind of split with the three children, the son leading just by a little bit. So this is pretty common, is that, we have 130 people on this webinar and we don't all agree. So somebody says, rotating around Christmas, sun because it's the bloodline path, draw names, buy new copies so the original can be preserved. Um, so equal chance to purchase, so it goes up in auction. So yeah, there is, a lot of you got really creative with your ideas by playing rock, paper, scissors, cutting it up in thirds, buying or purchasing the same year on eBay, um, and going from there. Um, and none of these suggestions are right or wrong. It's just what will work for your family. So for this one, um, and Patrick just said, aren't the memories more valuable than the book anyway? True. And that's where this becomes a troublesome, because can we hold on to that memory without that physicality of that book? And if we get a book from eBay, will it be the same? All those sorts of things as well. So the oldest daughter did share how they and their family decided what to do with the book. And she said, for now, the book is staying where it has always been. My brother has moved into the house and we get together a lot. I guess we're leaving it there because we can't figure out who should get it. So um, I always just think it's an interesting one for us to, think about. Does it make sense? What would we do? Oh, sorry, I went too far. Um, so what are some just common transfer rules? Um, so another common approach is to focus on the differences of the receivers into account. So we want this to be equitable. So we've talked about equality, we've talked about fairness, and now we're talking about equitability. So those needs can include, the differences can include needs, personal characteristics, and or contributions. So the needs can be physical, mental health, or economic. For example, personal possessions might be given to the family member who are in need of basic necessities. So there's, an adult child, grandchild moving out for the first time, and they need a sofa, and they need a table and chairs, and they need a bed. They might be first in line to be able to receive those possessions. Personal characteristics of receivers are another rule used to determine about who gets what. They want to know their possessions are going to someone who cares about the object and finds it meaningful. And sometimes those personal characteristics out of one's control are used as a rule for distributing possessions. Oftentimes, when that characteristic is used, that is considered unfair. So, what is an example? The oldest always choosing first, the daughter without children is excluded, or males automatically get everything in the garage or shed. So, think about, who is all involved with those. Another one that people may look at is those differences in contributions. So contributions can be counted in different ways, time, running people to appointments, making meals, cleaning home. It could be money. And that complicates that distribution process. So another example. So in my family, everyone knows that you get back gifts you've given when someone dies, except for money and time, that is. I'm the daughter who lives near mom and dad and takes them to their doctor's appointments, cleans their house, and helps them out financially when it's needed. My sister from back east is always sending expensive gifts for birthdays and holidays. Who do you think will get back the most when mom and dad die? As you can see, while we're recognizing that differences may be considered fair, thinking through the details will be critical to whether other family members perceive the decisions as fair as well. So we have another scenario for you. So meet Don and Evelyn. Don and Evelyn, sorry, I'm reading the chat and you guys are keeping us on our toes here. Okay, so Don and Evelyn raised 4 kids and lived in the same family home for 52 years. The home was full of accumulated possessions from raising the kids, grandkids visits, and lots of family collections and history. They refused to talk with any of the kids about inheritance issues over the years, but did make it known that they had a will. The will was read. It said that everything in the house was to be sold at a public auction, absolutely no exceptions, and the money was to be divided equally among the 4 children. If a family member wanted something, he or she could go to the auction and make a bid. What do you all think? Was that process fair? Somebody said, come on. Yes, personally love that idea. Yes, yes. Right. Caroline just said, I hope all the children had access to financial resources. It is financially fair. Not my favorite. It's a lot of family members that have used this process as well. Only fair if they all have the means to bid on what they wanted. And that, that one is, I like that. It's okay, but questionable. So yeah, it is tricky. Like what we said, we just talked about there being the differences in contributions, the equality, the equitability, the fairness of it. So when we're only looking at fair, it might be, but then there's that potential of hurt feelings because I'm not economically able to purchase anything because I struggle. But I was really hoping to get a lamp that my parents had that could be something that I can remember them with and help to hold on the memory. So, as you can see, read through the comments, there's a lot of different ways people think about it. And again, there's not a right or a wrong answer, which can drive people bonkers with this.
When I wonder on this scenario as well, if Don and Evelyn could have communicated their plans to have prepared the kids a little bit, that maybe would have made a bit of a difference and avoided some of the shock.
Mhm.
Yep.
Right. Yep, that's true as well. Okay. So what does make a process fair? So the biggest one is just agreement on who participates in making the decisions, who's in or who's out. When the fairness criteria is not met, the process is considered unfair. So thinking about the rules about who should get what, judging if the decision process are fair and are they spoken and recognized by everybody? Or did, here Don and Evelyn agreed that this process was fair and then they came to agreement as spouses. However, their children may have thought differently because they did not know. So should have they been included or not? What was that level of communication? So we talked about Marilyn doing this program, and her recent research on families and inheritance decisions has been identifying common judgment criteria family members can use in dividing personal possessions. So when we think about that, what are those 4 criteria? So that participation criteria is the first one. Who is in, who is out, who gets to carry out the decisions? Should the property owners make all the decisions without consulting potential receivers? Our example, should adult children have input on what's fair? And then who are the other subgroups or stakeholders in your family? The siblings, stepchildren, in-laws, grandchildren, aunts, uncles, other potential heirs, close, friends. So consistent rules across each subgroup is typically important. If one in-law gets to be included, then all should be included. So that's the first one, is the participation criteria. The next one is to look at the process of the fairness. So does this happen pre-death, when there's that transition to, like smaller housing or hospitalization? Does it happen to post-death? What are the specific methods? We talked about monopoly, rock, paper, scissors, order, drawing straws, all that kind of stuff. And can we negotiate or can we not? So if I'm stuck with something, can I then ask my brother if he'd be willing to negotiate for me to get something that he has, and maybe I have something that he has, or be able to buy it from him? Those sorts of things as well. When we think of Don and Evelyn, the parents decided to plan in advance and not share those plans, and they had identified those possessions should be sold at a public auction and how the proceeds should be divided. As property owners, they rightfully determined the decision details or elements they wanted. Whether or not the other family members considered the decision details to be fair is unknown. And here is an example of, a process maybe not looking as fair. So the process had been agreed upon by all siblings, but this brother chose not to follow the process, taking what he wanted in advance of others. So, agreeing to wait on divide possessions for several months. However, my brother was in the garage taking tools when we returned from the church after the funeral. And how would that, we had determined on the process, and now it's no longer the process. So the outcome is going to be different. We also, mention a little bit about that communication. We want to make sure it's transparent and consistent, and that all key individuals know the same. So not hearing that nobody bothered to tell me, if only I would have known, I could have taken off work, that kind of stuff, are often common reactions when it is an unfair process. Sharing that information in writing allows everyone to receive that information. So whether that's a text string, a Facebook message to everybody, an email, a written letter, however, not just a verbal, like, hey, we're going to distribute mom and dad's stuff next Saturday. That work for you? Great. We'll see you then, but not setting a time or anything like that, or not letting everybody know as well. If a process is viewed as fair, again, it includes accurate and complete information. So here is another example of knowing a family member's wishes. So grandmother promised a certain rocker to a grandchild in her will, but an aunt insisted she was taking it no matter what. So something else happens with that process. And another one, my brother-in-law appraised certain antiques and his estimates were far from accurate. Another story that we've recently heard was one sister was to receive a cherry wooden rocker from her mother, but then another sister took the rocker and would not negotiate. The sisters are no longer speaking. And so oftentimes when we think about this, it's not what the actual value of an item. So in this, sorry, lost my train of thought. The second example, my brother-in-law appraised, and the issue is of what is accurate information about the value of an item affected whether that process was considered fair or not. And then how are we treating each other in the process? There can all be all kinds of rules and agreed upon processes, but how do individuals experience that process? Do they feel respected and treated with dignity? Are those involved being honest with each other? And quite a few mentioned honesty and trustworthiness earlier. Can they trust each other to do what is agreed upon? You lose trust when somebody comes and takes things without looking. Family members often have expectations about what it means to treat each other ethically, and what is right and what is wrong. So again, a few more examples. I was allowed to be at the table, but didn't have a voice. No one listened to me. One of my sister took items when she thought none of us were looking. So those all can be issues. Also, when we think about listening to fairness and thinking about fairness as a whole, listen for fairness, language, assumptions, and motives. uncover any assumptions and unwritten rules and criteria to find common ground before distribution starts to happen. Often it's easier to identify what is unfair versus what is fair, and ask why it is considered fair or unfair if people are not agreeing to that. And I do have to chuckle because a lot of people are talking about, doing a post-it note and that kind of stuff. And the thing is that Suzanne said, like, that adhesive gives out. It could get removed by a strong wind. Somebody could replace it very easily. So moving it to a spreadsheet is a great idea as well. All right.
Well, we can see that fairness is a huge issue because we had lots of slides that address that, and it definitely is, and coming up with a common definition of what fair means in your family is really important. So now we are on to the fourth key protective factor, and that's understanding that belongings have different meanings to different individuals. And so true. We've been seeing that in the chat as well. Older adults oftentimes want to ensure that their prized possessions and family heirlooms will go to people who will treasure them and care about them and value them as much as they did. But, how do we really know if people are going to value and treasure our objects the way we do? And again, remember that value is in the eye of the beholder. So one of the examples that they found in the research was a sister who valued a second generation round oak table because she remembers playing cards and board games on it. And she wants to pass it on to her children in the future. But her sister didn't have the same memories, didn't place much sentimental value on it, but thought, oh, I could sell that and get some cash, right? So we all might have different thoughts of value. Another example is a dad who might highly value his collection of baseball cards, but it might be that nobody else in the family is a baseball card collector and really doesn't care about them. Or what about an older woman who is so excited about her collection of 350 thimbles that she wanted to pass on, and nobody in the family was so excited about those thimbles. So it really takes some communication, and it really is easy to make wrong assumptions about who might want what and why. I love it. I think Sam, we've talked about this cartoon too, but one day, son, this will all be yours and your sister's. And it looks really overwhelming to me. And there's probably some conversations that could happen because oftentimes what we've accumulated over a lifetime may not be valued by other family members. So I am curious about what are the pie plates in your family? We've had some of you sharing. Oh, Patty's talking about the Swedish death cleaning. Yes, right. Sorting through and getting rid of things. If you haven't had a chance to share some of the pie plates from your family, go ahead and put those in the chat. We have had several examples. And Susan said, yes, we do have thimbles and tiny notes inside of each on who's getting what. Photographs, Jacqueline, I think photographs are one of those great things because we can scan and reprint some of those. So that's really great. Carnival glass, spoons. Oh, I was like, what's a JD 530? You're talking a John Deere tractor, right? So Sam's a farm girl. I'm not. She's shaking her head. Yep, got to have space for that. So lots of great examples here. The family Bible, grandma's jewelry, lots of different things. And so it's important to have conversations and to ask family members that you want to have involved, if you're the giver or if you're a potential receiver as well, but asking what items would you want to receive and why? So asking those potential receivers and asking them, why is that item meaningful to you? And then also, I think this question is unique, asking the potential receivers, what items should others receive and why? So then they can say, well, yeah, I think my brother should get whatever object, and this is why. And the brother might be like, no, or yeah, that really would make sense. And I like the fourth item bullet here as well. Are there items that should not be passed out of the family, and why? No matter who gets it? Are there things that we want to remain within the family? And if we think back, was it Don and Dorothy that had the auction, right? Someone in the chat shared that they had done something similar in their family, but there were other family members, and I think you used the word sabotage that. So when you have a public auction, there's risk of others bidding and things ending up outside of the family. So it's so key to have these conversations as well. You may or maybe have not wondered why this program is called Who Gets Grandma's Yellow Pie Plate? And so Andrea was a young 4-H intern working in Chippewa County, and Marlene Stum and her team were meeting in the back office in Montevideo at the extension office. And Andrea stuck her head in the door and she said, "What are y'all working on?" And they described the project and the research study to her. And she's like, "Oh yeah, you're talking about the yellow pie plate." And so in her family, they had a yellow pie plate because her grandma had done a lot of baking, right, with her daughters and then the grandchildren. And so that's how this program got the yellow pie plate title. I do want to mention before Sam takes us into the next key factor is, again, in the booklet, there are some great worksheets on how to tell the stories about items too. So not only finding out who wants what and why, but for the owners to write down the stories around objects.
Thanks, Sarah. Our next one is thinking about the distribution options and consequences. So again, there are a couple of different options. Like I've been saying, there is no one perfect method of transfer that we're going to say, if you do this, no family conflict will occur. That'd be great, but does not exist. So we have to think about like which one will work for us. Again, it depends family situations. It may be completely inappropriate for somebody else's. And every method does have a consequence. Planning in advance for the distribution of personal possessions allows, again, those property owners more choices and options, and allows wishes to be known and carried out. Estate executors, likely family members, are too often left without any plans in place and faced with cleaning out a family home with fewer options, if that is what happens. Make sure you stay focused on your identified goals. So set some goals. What about the process? What does your family and you, if you're that executor, hope to get out of it? Doing so will help you determine which distribution option will help you achieve your most important goals. For example, when we think about Donna and Evelyn's example of choosing that public auction as a mean of distributing all of their personal possessions, it's likely that privacy was not a priority for them because they did a public auction. So here are the options. Oh, I keep forgetting to do this. There we go. So you can gift somebody something. You can do a verbal or a someday promise to somebody. Masking tape or the Post-it notes we talked, I loved, I don't remember who it was, but they said, I plan to outlive that adhesive. So I think I might make a spreadsheet, which is very true. Masking tape and Post-it notes, can lose their adhesive qualities and not be there any longer. Doing a public auction or an auction within the family, filtering items, donating items, or just doing nothing. And, we want to, this is a very serious, but when you look at these two cartoons, they chose two different distribution items or distribution options. One was, the Post-it notes all over the place, including on the floor and blowing away in the wind. And another one having a foot race to see who gets what as well. So if you do nothing, what happens? So if somebody passes away without estate plans in place or wishes known, there are state laws that do apply. Every state has intestate and succession laws describing how property should be divided when there is no will. Non-titled property does become part of the estate, and the estate executor is charged with determining how that property should be distributed, and it is often the adult siblings who are left to work out the passing on of personal possessions without the benefit of knowing the owner's wishes. Far too many individuals are not aware of who would inherit their estate or process if there is no will, and far too many individuals die without a legal and up-to-date will. The first tip is to visit the link that is provided, and to find out your state-specific intestate laws and probate statute information. Consult an experienced probate and estate planning attorney who can help develop appropriate plans for your situation as well. Right. And yes, Jacqueline just said probate can take a while. So if it does go into probate, it'll be a bit before you're able to have access to that. The next one is to create a separate list. And this is the recommended approach, is to create a legally recognized written list as part of a legal will, explaining who should get what property after your death. Most states allow individuals to simply indicate in their will that they have a separate list. So if you do the Excel spreadsheet, that would work. Creating a separate list allows you to change it as needed without dating your entire will and being able to avoid some attorney costs. Just want to make sure to verify your separate list is legal in your state by consulting the state statutes or consulting an estate planning attorney as well. And here is a sample of what this separate list does look like. So you just want to make sure that who is receiving the item and what is that item after you pass away that they will receive. You want to make sure that individuals are clearly named, so that they're clearly understood. So if you're a family that has a lot of juniors, seniors, 1, 2, 3, or children, grandchildren named with the same names, to make that clarification as well. To have legal status, the separate list typically needs to be referred to in the will, in the handwriting of the property owner, or signed by the owner, as well as dated. So property owners may use a written list for their most valued personal possessions or the pie places that might be a source of conflict for others. And, we first started doing these online webinars when COVID happened, and we found that a lot of people were attending because they were deciding to either downsize or to declutter. So as you're going through those services, or going through those times in our lives, spring cleaning, fall cleaning, whatever, or if you're moving homes, we often get rid of things, and maybe before we get rid of things, there might be things that others would be interested in having or have, more memories attached to them than we realize. So just think about those things. And if you are in that, think about professional help and moving services, sorting and donating, as well as giving away as well, because we had somebody mention the Swedish death cleaning or the KonMari method. There's a whole bunch of different ways to do that as well. All right, Sarah.
Great. I was just working on a response to a question that somebody sent me. Someone asked, will there be a recording of the webinar? Yes, we will be sending out a recording of the webinar. Down the road a little bit. We need to get closed captioning on that and everything. An individual was interested in sharing this with their spouse and siblings, but we will also be sharing again a link to our Pie Plate webpage. And on that webpage is about a 30-minute video with covering the 6 factors that we're covering today. So in the interim, that video would be great to be sharing with family members. So now we're going to quickly go to the last key protective factor, and that is to agree to manage conflict as it arises. And research does show that families can do this without major conflict. And so there will be challenges, but families will need to navigate that. But they can get through this without scars. But they just need to manage some of those disagreements and differences as they go through. It's important to recognize and head off any potential sources of conflict. And conflict is often more common when the property owners don't make or communicate their property transfer decisions prior to death, leaving those adult children and others with the responsibility to work it out. So as owners, you can help reduce the amount, or maybe even eliminate, if you're lucky, the amount of conflict if you communicate ahead of time. So research has identified these 4 common sources of conflict that arise when dealing with personal possessions and inheritance decisions. So again, that lack of communication, different attitudes, beliefs, or values. Again, that unresolved prior conflicts, right? Going back to those family issues that have been around for years, or different expectations about rules. So when we're trying to manage or resolve conflict, remember to listen, communicate, and be transparent in your words and actions. At some time, you may need to agree to disagree. Learn how to negotiate and compromise. And there may be times where you want to bring in a neutral third party, a mediator, to help with some processes. We get help on a lot of things in our life. If your family needs help going through some of this, definitely you could seek somebody out. Also, forgiving, repairing relationships is important. And then again, our last one there, involve mediators or third parties as necessary. So again, these are the 6 key factors. They're really critical. So whether you're planning in advance to transfer your own personal possessions, or you're working with family members to distribute property after death, think about and talk about these 6 key factors. So this is the website, and we will throw that into the chat. Sam, are you able to do that while I go through? Perfect, thank you. And again, you can find information about the workbook there, and there is that brief 30-minute video that covers the 6 factors if you want to be sharing that with others. You know, in inheritance decisions can really be a celebration of a person's life and provide meaningful continuity. So if we put some thought into it, it can be a really positive experience. So now getting down to the logistics. If you need a certificate of participation, or if you are interested in those University of Minnesota well-being points, if you are on the university insurance, we need you to complete the evaluation. And Sam, if you can grab this link as well, thank you so much. We invite everybody to complete the evaluation because that feedback is so very important to us and to our supervisors and Extension as a whole. Again, those that want a certificate, or if you want the link to get your well-being points, please complete the evaluation, and that will carry you through to those goals. Also know that we'll be sending a follow-up evaluation about 30 days after the end of this series, because we want to learn about how you use the information. Did you have a conversation with someone? Did you start planning? So please be expecting that in your email box as well. We have a variety of upcoming webinars we invite you all to participate in. Some of our Spanish speaking colleagues are doing a variety of webinars, so check those out or share those with your Spanish speaking colleagues. We have a few on the topic in the series of finding balance, some on the later life decision making. So I'm looking forward to the webinars in there. We also have some financial ones on making sense of it all. So a variety of those. We're going to learn about TANDAs tomorrow. If you want to learn about that, please join us. We also have some housing related webinars. Ben Winchester from our Center for Community Vitality is doing the 2 middle ones here. So I'm excited to be working with Ben on that. And then we have some on recovery and health as well. Oops, sorry, that hand is covering up that writing. But check out those webinars. And then our last one is What's for Dinner. And I am super amazed at our registration numbers for the grocery shopping and the meal planning and the shopping and cooking for 2. So we've got a lot of people super interested. Sam, if you're able to put those 2 bottom links in the chat, that would be great. So this link down here for the family development webinars will get you to all of those webinars. And then this bottom link will,
Sara,
yes.
just to insert, if you do the evaluation link, it's going to say, thank you for doing a webinar. but then there's a
Oh,
little arrow that we would ask you to click on, and that will say, take you to actual evaluation. If you're on your mobile, it might be an issue. We will work to fix that for our next webinars. So,
okay. Yeah,
but it
we
is,
will check that out before we'll send that link in a follow-up email as well. Okay. Great. Well, we will put these two links for future webinars in the chat as well as a follow-up email. We also invite you to check out our Extension Center for Family Development on social media. So we'll include those as well. We will send a follow-up email with a PDF of the PowerPoint slides. We'll make sure we have a workable link for the evaluation, and we'll send all of the links that we've talked about.